Lelana woke in Nambara with the kind of morning light that made everything look gentle, yet her chest felt tight, as if joy and fear were pulling her in opposite directions. Her aunties crowded around her, teasing her while they fixed her hair, tapping her shoulder, telling her to smile wider. She laughed with them, soft and nervous, but she kept seeing Madame Zuhra's cold eyes in her mind. She told herself it didn't matter, not today. Outside, the courtyard smelled of roasted millet and early rain, and children chased each other through the dust as if nothing bad could ever happen. For a moment she let herself breathe, imagining a day that would unfold without shadows. But as she walked toward the gathering hall in Zelani, a small tremble followed her steps. The streets were bright with cloth banners, and women sang from balconies, but she felt something sharp move inside her whenever she thought of Madame Zuhra watching her. She kept moving anyway, pretending she didn't feel it. She whispered little jokes to herself, the way she used to as a girl when she needed courage. By the time she reached the old stone archway, the sun had climbed high enough to warm her shoulders. She stopped there, closed her eyes, and let the warmth settle into her bones. She wanted the day to hold her gently. She wanted one clear moment where nothing chased her. So she lifted her chin, pushed open the doors, and walked into her future before doubt could pull her back. The hall in Zelani looked almost unreal when we stepped inside, the kind of place that makes you stop for a second because the colors seem too bright to be true. Long ribbons of gold cloth hung from the ceiling, catching the light every time someone moved, and the air was thick with perfume and drum echoes. I remember Lelana smiling as she walked in, holding her bouquet like it was something fragile, but the smiles coming back at her were thin, quick, the kind people give when they're checking who else is watching. A few guests leaned toward each other with half-covered mouths, whispering things they thought we couldn't hear, small things about where she grew up and who her parents were. She kept her head high, but I saw her shoulders tighten. Kayo noticed first and reached for her hand, squeezing it with that quiet smile he used when he wanted her to feel safe. She squeezed back, though her eyes flicked around the hall like she was trying to map every exit. Even the music sounded different then, bright on the surface but hiding something underneath, like a song played in the wrong key. We walked deeper into the hall and the noise swallowed us. People laughed too loudly, dresses brushed past in waves of bright colors, and the drums shook the wooden floor under our feet. Lelana tried to joke about the heat, saying the hall felt like a sun-warmed basket, and for a second she even laughed, a small breathy sound that made Ko chuckle. But the moment passed when an older woman in a long turquoise wrapper looked her up and down slowly, as if she were measuring fabric. Lelana's smile faded at the edges. I could see her fighting to stay steady, trying to stay present, but the hall felt like it was closing in on her, like every wall had grown eyes. She kept walking anyway, greeting elders, lowering her head politely, even when a few of them responded with a kind of cool politeness that pretended to be warm. Ko hovered close, cracking quiet jokes about the decorations being so shiny they could blind someone. She nudged him with her elbow, managing a real smile this time, and for a moment I believed she would be fine. But then a woman behind us muttered something about a bride who climbed too high too fast, and the words seemed to hit Lelana like a pebble striking glass. The crack wasn't visible, but you could feel it. The lights above flickered once, making the hall glow in a strange golden pulse, and Lelana paused, as if wondering if she could breathe in this place at all. It should have felt like a dream. Instead, it felt like a test she didn't ask for. She lifted her chin again, slower this time, and stepped forward with Ko beside her, both of them trying to act as if the room wasn't filled with eyes waiting to see if she would stumble. And even though she kept walking, even though her smile stayed on her face, I could tell she was already bracing herself for something none of us could name yet. When Lelana knelt before the elders, the whole hall grew so quiet it felt as if even the drums outside were holding their breath. She lowered her head, trying to calm the shaking inside her, and for a moment she let herself imagine that everything around her was warm and loving, the way she had hoped this day would be. But then Madame Zura stepped forward with a soft, careful smile, the kind that made people think she was fixing something small and harmless. She reached for Lelana's earrings as if adjusting them, her fingers cool against Lelana's skin, and leaned in close enough that no one else could hear. Her whisper slid into Lelana's ear like something sharp. She said Lelana was the worst decision her son had ever made. Just that. No anger, no rush. A simple sentence dropped like a stone straight into her chest. Lelana didn't flinch. She didn't even exhale. She knew everyone was watching, waiting for her next breath, and she held herself still the way she had learned to as a girl when the world seemed too heavy. But her heartbeat stumbled so hard she felt it in her throat. The hall around her blurred a little, colors melting into each other, and she could hear the elders chanting blessings that suddenly felt far away, like voices underwater. She tried to focus on the floor beneath her knees, the cool stone, the faint smell of jasmine from someone's robe, anything that could steady her. She thought of the mornings in Nambara when her cousins would wake her early with laughter, tugging her into the day whether she was ready or not. She thought of Kayo standing at the far end of the hall, trying to look calm even though she knew he was nervous. If she lifted her head, she would see him watching her with hope he didn't know how to hide. That thought almost broke her more than the whisper. She stayed still, hands folded neatly, face steady, while inside her chest something cracked like dry wood. Madame Zura stepped back with that same soft smile, the kind that could fool a stranger, and lifted her chin proudly as if she had just offered a blessing instead of a wound. Lelana kept her eyes low, afraid that if she looked up too soon everyone would see the hurt rising behind them. Someone in the hall laughed at a joke she couldn't hear, and the sound felt strange and far away. The scent of burning incense drifted past. Her palms grew damp. Her breath caught halfway, shaky and thin, and she swallowed it before anyone noticed. A young girl brought a small bowl of water to the elders, and the soft clinking of metal touched the air like a reminder that life around her was still moving, still expecting her to play her part. Lelana felt her own name echo in her mind, like she was calling herself back from someplace dark. She straightened her spine just a little, enough to stay upright, enough to keep the room from seeing how close she was to falling apart. And in that long, painful moment, she told herself she would survive this whisper, even if it left a mark she'd carry long after the ceremony ended. Lelana rose slowly from the elders' circle and murmured something about needing a moment, then walked out of the hall before her voice could betray her. The air outside hit her like cold water. She slipped behind the tall stone wall where the drummers kept their extra stools, a quiet corner where no one ever stood during ceremonies. Her breath came out in small, uneven bursts, the kind that burn a little on the way out, and she pressed her palms against the rough wall to steady herself. The whisper kept replaying in her mind, each repetition sharper than the last. It pulled old memories to the surface, memories she thought she had buried under years of effort and small victories. She saw herself again as a little girl in Nambara, raising her hand in class and being ignored until she lowered it. She heard the voices that used to say she talked too much, dreamed too much, wanted too much. She remembered being told she would never fit anywhere important, that girls from her street grew into women who knew how to survive but not how to shine. She had fought so hard to unlearn those words, but Madame Zura's whisper cracked something open, and all the old doubts came rushing back like smoke through a broken window. She wrapped her arms around herself and breath through her shaking, trying to pull herself together before anyone found her. She didn't want her pain to become a scene. She didn't want anyone to say later that she had proved Madame Zura right. The music inside the hall softened for a moment, and she wondered if anyone noticed she was gone. Then she heard footsteps, light ones at first, then faster. Kayo appeared around the corner with worry all over his face, though he tried to hide it behind that almost playful smile he always used when he wanted to make her feel safe. He stepped toward her, brushing dust from his sleeve, and asked what was wrong. His voice was gentle, full of a warmth she usually ran toward, but right now it felt too bright, too hopeful. She shook her head and looked down before he could read the truth in her eyes. She couldn't say it. Not him. Not today. Not when he was glowing with excitement, believing this was the best day of their lives. She didn't want to place her hurt in his hands and watch his joy dim. He reached out like he wanted to touch her cheek, then stopped halfway, unsure. She gave a small smile, the kind made of thin string, and told him she just needed a little air. His breath caught, but he nodded and stayed beside her without pressing further. They stood there in silence, the hall humming faintly behind them, the smell of roasted plantain drifting from the street. She focused on that smell, on the warmth of the sun settling on her shoulders, on the trust in Kayo's eyes even though she wasn't giving him anything. She felt something inside her loosen, but not enough to speak. She wasn't ready. All she could do was stand there, holding herself together piece by fragile piece, hoping the moment would steady her before she had to walk back into the noise. When Lelana finally stepped back into the hall, the warmth and noise rushed over her like a wave she wasn't ready for. People clapped lightly as she returned to her place beside Kayo, as if she had only gone to fix her veil, but her hands were still trembling. The lights above seemed brighter than before, almost too bright, turning every face toward her into a blur she couldn't fully read. She could feel Kayo's shoulder brushing hers, steady and warm, and she tried to draw strength from it. She told herself she only needed to get through the vows. Just a few sentences, just a moment of truth. The elders called for silence, and the crowd obeyed so quickly the quiet felt heavy. Kayo spoke first, clear and full of hope, his voice carrying through the hall like a soft drumbeat. Lelana watched him with a fragile smile, wishing she could borrow his calm the way she used to borrow his coat on cold nights in Nambara. When he finished, the hall erupted into gentle applause, and it was her turn. She lifted the small card where she had written her vows in neat handwriting, but the letters swam in front of her eyes. She tried again. Still nothing. She opened her mouth, ready to push sound out, but her throat closed as if someone had tied a string around it. The quiet in the hall shifted. A ripple of murmurs moved across the room like wind through dry grass. She heard someone whisper her name with concern, another with doubt. She felt her aunt lean close behind her, breathing steady and whispering for her to take her time, to breathe, to remember she wasn't alone. But the room didn't feel like a room anymore. It felt like it was shrinking, inch by inch, as if the walls themselves were leaning in to hear her fail. Her chest tightened. The card trembled in her hand, her vision blurred at the edges. She glanced toward Madame Zura without meaning to, and caught the small lift at the corner of her mouth. A look that wasn't quite a smile but held a quiet satisfaction, as if she had predicted this moment and was watching it unfold exactly as she wanted. That single look punched the air out of Lelana's lungs. She swallowed hard, but the knot stayed. She tried to speak again, forcing her lips to shape the first line, but only a thin, broken breath came out. Someone in the front row gasped. Someone else muttered that she wasn't ready for this kind of life. Lelana felt her knees weaken. Her heart thudded unevenly, loud enough she wondered if the entire hall could hear it. She wanted to disappear behind the stone wall again, to hide where no one's eyes could reach her. Kayo touched her back gently, a reassuring circle drawn with his thumb. She knew he was trying to ground her, to pull her back into the place where she wasn't alone, but the pull of panic was stronger. The hall spun slightly, the colors around her blending into strange streaks of gold and red. She felt tears prick the corners of her eyes, though she blinked them away before they could fall. The vows she had practiced for weeks sat inside her chest like trapped birds, beating their wings but refusing to fly. And in that crushing silence, with the whole room waiting for her to speak, Lelana stood there trembling, wondering how a day meant for joy had turned into a cage she couldn't breathe inside. The silence around Lelana felt heavy enough to crush her, and she stood there holding her vows like a child gripping something broken, not sure how to fix it. The murmurs swelled again, soft but sharp, and she could feel every pair of eyes pressing against her skin. Then, from the far corner, one of the drummers shifted on his stool. It was small, almost nothing, but another drummer glanced at him, then at Lelana, then back at his drum. No words passed between them. They simply nodded the way people do when they're answering a call no one else can hear. The first strike landed like a heartbeat, deep, certain. Then the others followed. The hall jumped with the sound. It wasn't the smooth, wedding rhythm everyone expected. It was the Ketu beat, the one from the red sand hills of Nambara, the one carried by women who had learned to stand straight even when the world tried to bend them. The rhythm rolled across the hall like thunder waking a quiet town. People gasped. A few elders frowned. But the drummers didn't stop. They played harder, hitting the air with a rhythm that felt like memory and rebellion all at once. The sound hit Lelana in the chest so suddenly she forgot to be afraid. She felt it move through her ribs, travel up her spine, and lift her shoulders as if someone had reached inside her and pulled a string tied to her strength. She blinked in confusion at first, then again with recognition, because she had grown up with this rhythm. She had danced to it barefoot in her grandmother's yard. She had heard her mother hum it on days when life felt too heavy. It was a rhythm stitched into her bones long before she ever imagined standing in this hall. The hall itself seemed to shift under the sound, colors sharpening, faces softening, the air warming like sunlight pushing through thick clouds. Someone near the back clapped once, not sure if they were allowed, then another followed, and soon the echo of hands filled the space alongside the drums. Lelana felt her breath returning in slow, steady waves. She lifted her head and the world no longer spun. The vows card in her hand stopped shaking. Her heart still beat fast, but the panic had loosened its grip. She looked at the drummers, their eyes bright with something like encouragement, though they never stopped playing. Kayo watched her with a mixture of surprise and quiet pride, his mouth parted as if he was witnessing something rare and beautiful. Lelana straightened her spine. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't loud. It was just a simple rise, a reclaiming of her own body, her own moment. The Ketu beat rolled through her again, telling her in its steady voice that she belonged here, that she had always belonged, no matter what anyone whispered. Guests leaned closer, sensing the shift. Even Madame Zura's smile faded a little, her eyes narrowing as if the rhythm had undone a thread she thought she tied tight. Lelana inhaled deeply, and this time the air filled her fully. The drums went on, stronger, braver, and she felt something inside her settle into place, like a girl who had been wandering finally stepping back onto familiar earth. Lelana stepped forward while the Ketu beat still rolled through the hall, and for the first time that day, she didn't feel small. She lifted her hand toward the elders and asked for the mic, her voice soft but clear enough to stop every whisper in the room. The drums quieted as if they understood they had done their part. The hall went still in a way that felt different from before, not heavy, just waiting. Lelana held the mic with both hands, steadying herself, and took a breath that felt like it came from years back, from fields in Nambara, from long afternoons spent proving she was worth listening to even when no one cared. She began slowly, her words simple, almost shaky, telling the hall she had grown up in a place where people often looked past her as if she wasn't there. She spoke of teachers who wrote her off before she opened her mouth, neighbors who smiled at her dreams like they were jokes, and long nights when she sat awake wondering if she would ever be enough for anyone. Her voice wavered once, but she didn't stop. Instead, she looked up, letting her eyes meet the faces staring back at her, and the more she spoke, the stronger her voice became. She talked about fighting to believe in herself, about learning to stand tall even when others hoped she wouldn't rise, about how choosing joy sometimes felt louder than choosing pain. Her words spread through the hall like warm rain, soft but unstoppable, and slowly people leaned in, shoulders dropping, eyes shining. She told them she had walked into this hall carrying old wounds she didn't show, and that she had almost let fear ruin her moment, but something inside her refused to stay quiet. She said she wanted her story to be one of courage, not silence. By then her voice was no longer shaking. It rang through the hall with a steady strength that didn't need to shout to be heard. A few elders nodded. A young girl in the audience wiped her cheeks. Kayo stood frozen, staring at her as if seeing a new light rise behind her. When she reached her final words, she spoke of love, of partnership, of choosing someone who saw her strength even on days she couldn't find it herself. Her voice softened again, but this time not from fear. It was calm, full, sure. When she finished, the hall didn't move for a heartbeat, as if everyone needed a moment to return to themselves. Then someone stood. Another followed. Soon the entire room rose with a wave of applause that washed over her like wind rushing through a canyon. Lelana lowered the mic slowly, her breath shaking in a different way now, full of release. Kayo walked toward her with tears running freely down his face, not bothering to hide them. When he reached her, he took her hands like they were something precious, and the look he gave her said more than any vow he had spoken. After the ceremony ended, the hall slowly shifted back into sound and movement, but something in the air had changed. Lelana felt lighter, as if the weight on her chest had finally cracked open and blown away. She was talking with her cousins when she noticed Madame Zura walking toward her, each step slow, her eyes searching Lelana's face with an expression that looked nothing like the sharp confidence she carried earlier. She didn't offer an apology, not even a soft one hidden inside polite words, but she paused in front of Lelana as if seeing her clearly for the first time. The silence between them held a strange warmth, like the moment before rain touches dry earth. For once, Madame Zura's gaze didn't cut. It simply acknowledged. Lelana nodded gently, not in surrender but in peace, choosing not to carry the whisper that tried to break her. She didn't need approval anymore. She had found her own strength today, and it was louder than anything said in the shadows. Later that night, she slipped outside with Kayo, the lanterns hanging from the trees swaying softly above them. The air smelled of roasted yam and sweet hibiscus, and the sky glowed with the last traces of sunset. They sat on the low wall near the gate, feet dangling like two teenagers hiding from their chores. When Ko nudged her shoulder and made a small joke about her dramatic entrance, she burst into laughter, the kind that shakes the tiredness out of your bones. He laughed too, resting his forehead against hers, both of them breathing easier than they had all day. From inside the hall, the Ketu drums rose again, strong and proud, filling the night like a heartbeat. Lelana listened with a soft smile, knowing the rhythm wasn't just music anymore. It was a reminder that she hadn't only made it through the day. She had stood tall in the center of it, claimed it, and walked out shining.